Hello, friends. A couple of you have asked me recently to comment on the Shy Girl situation, which I knew very little about because I don't really follow the gossip. I had seen it, of course, pop up on my YouTube feed and other social media, so I knew the gist of it. Which, if you are similarly clueless like me, Shy Girl was a self-published horror novel that was then picked up by Hachette, one of the biggest publishing companies, for a traditional publication deal. It was published in the UK first, but was also slated to be published in the US. When it came out in the UK, people started to notice that the writing seemed like it might have been AI generated. The rumblings about this kept building until Hachette ended up pulling the book from publication and canceling the US publication deal. After this accusation of using AI dropped, the author made a statement that she had not used AI, but she had handed her book over to an editor, and the editor might have used AI. Nevertheless, as of this recording, the book has been canceled. Now, if you want to deep dive into why people think this book might have been AI generated, there are extensive videos on this already. My stance on this is I am completely anti using generative AI for writing. Disheveled editing, Lydia here. I just wanted to say a few things real quick. For one thing, whenever I make videos talking about AI, somebody who loves using AI to write always comes in and defends AI as this wonderful creative tool. And, I can't stop you. But I don't have to like it. And the thing is that every person who's ever come into my comments defending AI is the person using it to write. I have yet to have a reader come in and be like, I demand AI books be published and be accepted in the industry. So while we might still be hashing out exactly the ethics of using AI to create and to what degree we will accept them, and there are instances where I am not necessarily opposed for certain kinds of editing and brainstorming and things like that. And in that case, it's more the environmental toll and the fact that it's like ruining small towns and stuff like that. But I do think that readers have a right to know if AI is being used. And generally, when they do know that AI is being used, they don't choose to read that book because, I want a soul behind every book I read, even the kind of, fluffy ones. So that was something that occurred to me the other day, that yes, everyone defending AI is the person using it, not the person just trying to find a good book to read. The other thing I wanted to know is one of my neighbors was doing yard work through the first half of this video, and I did not realize how well my microphone was going to pick up the sound of this damn yard work. So I'm very sorry about all of those sounds in this video. Unfortunately, it's spring, so I don't really know how I can avoid that, but it's there, and it is a bit annoying. The other thing is I'm just sorry that I didn't get this video up on Sunday like I usually do. Dade ended up having some complications from his surgery and was in the hospital for a few days. He's back home and doing well now, but it was a bit of a crazy weekend into early week, so I will catch up on videos now and enjoy the rest of the video. But I'm also an innocent until proven guilty kind of girl. So I think that Mia Ballard's claim that an editor may have been the one to add the AI sounds a little fishy, but also plausible. New authors sometimes do make bad decisions with their editors. So if she did just make a bad decision with an editor, I feel kind of bad for her with the internet pylon because it can be incredibly brutal. And if she did use generative AI, because internet pylons are so brutal, hopefully she learned her lesson and won't do that again. Either way, I'm not here to cast judgment on the author herself. But there was one aspect to this that I just kept mulling over. And that was the publisher letting the book out into the world without realizing that it was AI or knowing it was AI and letting it out into the world anyway. And it's just one incident. In this case, it's just about AI, But that moment kind of clicked for me, kind of a wake-up call for the publishing industry in general, that the publishing industry that I knew is changing forever. Now, if you're new here, my name is Lydia Foxglove. I started out my publishing career in traditional publishing under my real name in young adult publishing, and I started pursuing traditional publishing in 2006 when you still had to send out paper queries through the mail and the whole emailing agents and having research sites for agents, and like social media was not really a thing yet. You couldn't follow an agent on Twitter. It was still in a lot of ways kind of this old school publishing model that I had grown up expecting to be a part of when I was a kid. The things that I had read about in author biographies. Kind of this old school storied publishing imprints with these editors that are going to foster your career. And my first book was acquired in 2008 and published at the very end of 2009. And I remained in the traditional publishing industry pretty much until 2015, 2016. That was when I started to transition into indie publishing. At the time, although indie publishing had been around for some years at that point and people were making good money in it, it still felt very kind of underground, unknown, undiscovered by traditional publishing for the most part. Like, I didn't even really know much about self-publishing or like know that it was like a legit path until about that mid-2000s time frame when my friend Michelle Zink, another young adult author, had moved into indie publishing and started talking about how she was making really good money at it. And that was when I was like, oh my gosh, it's like a real career. But up until then, it was kind of scorned and scoffed at. People didn't know much about it. It was really only looked at as a way to maybe like publish a book that your publisher didn't pick up. When I was acquired in traditional publishing, like you have a long conversation with your editor about like inspirations for the book, working on the book. You go through an editing process that is intense. Now, it occurred to me that of all the books that I have purchased recently, I have a Barnes & Noble MasterCard, which is there just kind of as a treat to myself because it's a credit card rewards card that forces me to buy books with the credit card rewards rather than spending it on like just a cash back, something practical. Of course, it's better to have just a cash back card, but this is my one card that makes me get myself a little treat. So I have Barnes & Noble credit card, and that means now and then I treat myself to new fiction at Barnes & Noble. And I realized that out of all the books I bought in the last couple of years, quite a few of them started out indie published and then got picked up by traditional publishing. So I've been aware for a while that this model is happening. But the Shy Girl thing, what it showed to me is the potential extent to which publishers are picking up books from indie publishing without really vetting them. Like, I don't know what's going on. When you are picked up by a traditional publisher from indie, what happens? I don't know, because that hasn't happened to me yet. Knock on wood, maybe someday it will. So I guess I had naively assumed that there was still some quality control going on. And what the Shy Girl controversy says to me is that there is not. It might depend on the publisher, but at least in this case, whether Shy Girl was written by AI or not, there's pretty credible evidence that seems like it was. But even if it wasn't, the writing's just not great. Like, it would not have gone through my traditionally published editors and copy editors. Plus, my experience was that when I was acquired, my editor, we had such a long conversation and multiple long conversations over the course of working on the book. And I guess I had assumed that when this happens, that maybe you get a new editor. Like, I wouldn't think that an indie book, like, it's already done well. So I wouldn't guess maybe you'd have like a developmental editor that would like really change it because it already has fans. But I would have guessed that maybe it would get like a fresh copy edit. You'd talk to people at the publishing house about what your plans are for the future, your process. Like, my experience was that my editors were curious about like, how did you come up with this idea? What's your process? Like, they kind of want to know who you are and how you write, how you come up with stuff, how you like to work on edits. Like, they're going to be working with you, so they want to get to know you first. And now I'm starting to realize that this is probably not happening with indie books getting picked up by traditional publishing. I don't know if they have much editing input. Maybe they're just acquired and then handed off to like the marketing department. Maybe a really light copy edit. Maybe no one's really talking to these authors. If anyone out there has been through this process, I'd be very curious to know how it went for you. But just from looking at how this unfolded, I'm realizing I'm stupid, maybe. Like how optimistic of me. This is just like a capitalist cash grab, I guess. They see a book doing well and they snatch it up and they don't care if the book is good or not. That seems to be what happened here. So my thought here is I kind of want to blame the publisher here, because whether Mia Ballard's story about the AI editor is true or not, I feel like somebody at the publishing house should have figured that out before it got to the public. For one thing, these days, okay, maybe they don't care about AI in writing. Maybe they just saw it and thought, this seems like an AI wrote it, but it's a hit, so we don't care. B, maybe they didn't realize it was AI, but they probably should have someone on staff who is very familiar with generative AI writing, if that's the case, to like vet manuscripts. And I feel like this really needs a human touch still. One of the components of this scandal is that there was a New York Times article about this book in which a company that has an AI writing detector ran the book through their AI writing detector and said it's 78% AI or something like that. And that was kind of treated like it was valid evidence. But we know these AI detectors are not always legit. The thing about having a human review writing to see if it's AI generated is that part of the problem with AI generation is that it comes out with writing that sounds kind of good on the surface. Just like with the art, it looks fine until you start to really dig into it, right? Like you realize like somebody has an extra finger, or there's like a structure, there's a chair that doesn't make sense. How is this chair supporting itself? Or there's like a fold on fabric that like makes no sense. There'll be little things that make no sense in a piece of artwork that you just don't see immediately. You have to really study it. The same thing with AI writing. If you just kind of skim it, it's like, that sounds fine. But if you dig into it, you'll start to notice like weirdness, and there'll be like this uncanny valley quality to it. Certain type of like repetition, word usage, and things like that that just kind of tip you off subtly that it's AI. Sometimes it's more obvious than other times, but I feel like publishers should have someone on staff when they acquire a book to kind of go through it and be like, is this giving me the AI vibe? And B, just, is it good? Because part of the things people nitpicked about the book were just kind of like, even if a human wrote them, they wouldn't be very good. So personally, if traditional publishing is going to pick up an indie book, including my own indie books, part of the benefit of that to me would be, I would hope they would run it through a professional copy edit, because I'm doing my own copy edits and I've had experience working with professional copy editors that has helped me with a lot of my bad habits in writing, but I know I'm not catching everything. I would love to have a professional copy edit. That would be great. And I wouldn't even mind a professional line edit. Now, of course, I don't really want a developmental edit if the book has already been out there and has fans. I don't want somebody to get in there and be like, hey, what if this character was not a prince? You know, like when you get acquired by traditional publishing, sometimes they'll suggest really big changes. That would not fly if you already indie published a book and it had fans and it got changed on such a massive fundamental level. But as far as like line edits and copy edits, I would want that. I would want them to call me out if my writing was just sloppy. The other thing I experienced in traditional publishing is the editor always wants to work with you again. They're hoping that you're going to be a talent they can foster. Now, it doesn't usually work out that way. Even in the 2000s, the whole idea of an editor fostering a writer's career was quite rare compared to like mid-century publishing. But there's still that conversation with kind of that hope in mind that, like, hey, I, your editor, love your work. I hope I get to continue working with you. I hope your books do well. I hope we get to have a good, long relationship. Everyone's happy when you luck into that kind of thing. So when they acquire your book, you're usually having a little bit of conversation about, like, what are you working on next? Where do you see your career going? Things like that, with the hopes that you're going to keep publishing with them. But if they're just kind of putting out a book that already did well and not really like vetting it for quality and not really working with an editor, I assume these conversations are not really happening. So to me, this situation goes far beyond one book. It speaks to the state of traditional publishing in general and where it might be going, and just why a lot of us are noticing a lowering of quality control. And again, this is not universal, and I am not blaming most of the actual people who work in publishing, because everyone I've ever met who works in publishing on like the editing, the copy editing, the marketing side are overall lovely people who are really passionate about good books. My assumption is probably that this is coming from like a corporate point of view, that they're being instructed to, like, hey, marketing department, see what's out there in the indie landscape that's like hot right now, see if you can acquire it and we can just pump it out and get that money. Because the one thing about indie publishing, it is a huge industry now. It is starting to drive what sells, whether it's because indie books are getting acquired by traditional publishing or because the trends that are bleeding into traditional publishing are coming out of indie publishing in a lot of cases. It is a huge component of the publishing industry now, and a lot of indie publishers are operating like small publishers rather than just some, the old school self-publishing, like, somebody wrote a picture book and they're hawking it at a local fair or something. No, nowadays, some of these people are extremely professional with translations and merchandise and book tours and all of that. But the one thing that is very difficult when you're an indie publisher is getting bookstore distribution and library distribution. You can get some of it, but it's very small compared to what you would get with a traditional publishing deal. So traditional publishers, there's a lot of meat on the bone left for them, even if you've had a book that's done really well as an indie. Traditional publishers can get you a lot of distribution that you wouldn't get otherwise. So it makes sense for them to just look at what's popular, grab it up, put it out there, make that money, and that could be kind of unfortunate for books. Now, I do want to say I don't think that the indie to traditional pipeline is all bad. I think there's a lot of good things about it. For one thing, as I mentioned, it means that we are seeing fresh trends and fresh genres emerge from indie publishing. Some of them very creative, some of them like cozy fantasy was something that I had been wanting for years. And it took indie publishing for it to finally hit, and traditional publishing embraced it in a huge way. It also means that we're getting a more real view of what reader tastes are, for better or for worse. Some of it is for worse. Sometimes readers' tastes can be pretty base, but on the other hand, sometimes reader tastes can be delicious. I'm not sure what metaphors I'm going for here, but one of the things I consistently encountered in traditional publishing is editors not quite seeming to get the thing about a book that makes it special. And one of the things that was the most obvious to me wasn't even my personal experience, but was when Harry Potter came out and was huge. And we saw a ton of copycat Harry Potter books that were like, it's a different kind of magic school, or, it's a different kind of hero in a slightly different setting, but we have like all the same structure as Harry Potter, adventure, blah, blah, blah. Most of these Harry Potter knockoffs, though, did not have the depth of world building and character that the Harry Potter books had at the time. They kind of stood out in the time they were published for having like characters that you would follow across 7 whole books that had like rich lives, and like the way the world building unfolded and the way that the like mysteries and stakes unfolded was kind of unusual in middle grade at that time. And a lot of the copycats didn't have that quality to them. And they maybe didn't have like the commitment to 7 books. They were only like a trilogy, and the characters were kind of thin. I'm not trying to promote Harry Potter, but at the time I did notice like these Harry Potter knockoffs don't actually have the thing I liked the most about Harry Potter, the character development and the idea that I was going to be sticking with these characters for a while and like seeing them grow and change. And it kind of makes sense because committing to 7 books as a traditional publisher is a lot. Usually they don't want to tell an author like, hey, we're going to publish 7 books, so you can go ahead and plan out 7 book character arcs. That's like too much for them to commit to financially, but if you're an indie publisher, maybe you can say, you know what, I'm just going to plan out a 10 book series. I'm just doing this for fun. I already have a day job and I come home and I work on my 10 book series and either it sells or it doesn't. In the past, you couldn't have done that. You would have no way to distribute it. These days, we are starting to see some rather long and involved worlds and deeper character work coming out of indie publishing because they have the luxury to be able to say, yeah, I'm going to get deep into this world, deep into these characters. I really like that part about it. And then traditional publishing can pick it up from there if they want to. The other thing, of course, authors have more control, and that pretty much ties back into what I just mentioned. When you were bound to traditional publishing being the only way to get your work out there, you had very little control. Your agent would send your book out there. You might get an offer, you might get 2 offers. If you only get 1 offer and you talk to that editor and they're like, well, you planned this out as a trilogy, but we really want it as a standalone. Could you make it into a standalone? Well, what are you going to do? Chances are, if this is your job, you're going to make it a standalone because this is the only offer you got. You already wrote the book because that's usually how publishing works. Most people don't sell books until they've written the entire thing. And, you know, you want to get something for your efforts and see it out there. So if they want a standalone instead of a trilogy, you're going to find a way to do it. And then if they get in there and they say, hey, can you cut this very important side plot because I don't think this is working. You're going to be like, man, I love that character so much, but okay. It's not always that straightforward. Sometimes you might push back. You might find a new way to work in that plot line. Sometimes you sell a standalone and they end up wanting to make it a trilogy. The point is you don't know what's going to happen. You are not the one in the driver's seat. You are an aspect of it. You have input that will be considered, and ultimately you're the one who has to write it and edit it, so you can say no, but as a result you might not get a contract or even get your contract revoked. So you're not in control, but in indie publishing you are in control of your story entirely, which is great. It is not something that I would trade. There are certain books that I don't mind giving up a level of control over, but there are certain types of books that I really want to keep that control over what I planned and know that I'm going to be able to execute it. And my Hidden Lands books are those kind of books. It's an extensive fantasy world. It would be so unlikely that traditional publishing would pick this up, and it just would never see the light of day. However, there are some real downsides to this situation. And the Shy Girl thing really hammers home what some of those downsides are, like the quality of books overall just starting to diminish. I think a lot of us are noticing that traditional publishing is starting to follow a lot of like book talk trends and things like that. And if you've ever tried to market on book talk or Instagram Reels or anything, you will know that certain types of things really, really do well on book talk and Reels. And that is smut. A really killer like premise that's like, oh my gosh, I have to know how this is going to unfold. And like really emotional, like almost overwrought emotional hooks. If you write a book that doesn't have any of those things, and I know because most of my books do not, it is very hard to market on Book Talk and Reels. You just don't have the hooks that are going to go viral. Like, my books have some very emotional moments, but they're not structured in a way that can easily be broken down into like a really short bite. They usually require the context of what happened previously in the book, and they don't work in isolation. Whereas the kind of things that do work are kind of really beat you over the head moments oftentimes. Things like when he catches you, I don't know. I spent the last like 60 seconds just staring at the wall trying to think of how I could even finish that. But you know what? It starts with something like that. There are also books on my shelf that the thing I love about them the most is the quality of the prose. And that also does not do as well on Book Talk. You're not going to do like this mega hook that's just a beautiful descriptive passage, because it's a very different kind of experience being on this frenetic social media versus settling down with a richly described fantasy historical novel or whatever. So I'm not saying there aren't still books being published with great literary merit and nuance and depth. Of course there are. But I do think we're starting to see a trend toward this very like grabby in your face book talk type stuff. And of course, as this is showing, we're also just seeing less editing. Sometimes less editing is good. Editors are not. I've had whole videos talking about the problems with editing sometimes. But all in all, most beginning authors could really stand to go through some tough edits. Removing edits from the equation entirely, or making them merely voluntary for authors and they don't necessarily hire the best person on their own, you're more likely, I think, to get a really great editor experience when the editor is choosing you and has to invest in you and is really excited about you. It's still not always perfect, but when you are a newbie author trying to decide on an editor, a lot of people hire editors that are not really a great match for them. If Mia Ballard is telling the truth, then that sounds like exactly what happened to her. She hired an editor who steered her in a bad direction and possibly used generative AI to alter her book, and she trusted this editor and just went ahead with those edits. It is possible that she is entirely telling the truth, because I can't imagine there are beginning authors who would do exactly that. Knowing how to be edited is a skill in and of itself. How to look at an editorial letter in your line edits and know when you really want to take those edits, when you want to push back, when the entire relationship just isn't working. Like, that is also a skill. So in an ideal world, I do not want to see publishers trying to exert too much control over indie books, and I would love to see this trend continue where they're picking up successful indie books and giving them traditional publishing levels of distribution. But I would also love to see that some aspects of a good editor-writer relationship continuing here. These indie authors should be getting good line and copy editing and a good talk with somebody there at the publishing house, and possibly some fostering of the next steps in their career. I think that could really benefit everyone involved in a lot of ways. Those are my thoughts about this whole situation. I'm just very disappointed in the publisher for letting this happen in the first place, to be quite honest. And it does make me worry a little bit where publishing is going. So yeah, I would love to know what you guys think about this situation. And if you'd like more from me, my members get 2 bonus videos per month voted on by you guys, as well as access to my Discord. You can access that through my YouTube memberships, Substack, and Patreon. You might want to join my Substack and Patreon anyway, because I try to do like a weekly little just fun update email about some topics, sometimes expanding on the videos. If you'd like to read any of my books, my Hidden Lands books are the ones I most recommend, but you can find all my books through a link in the description. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe. I post every Sunday and sometimes on Wednesdays. And I thank you so much for watching. See you next time. Bye! Coco. already had all their food, but they're so hungry. And of course, the lion's making his little whisper talk.